Randall Report, Season 1, Episode 30, the special PM Resigns.
Oh, that's it. I've got a bit more light here. Have I? Good day to you all. The Randall Report gets serious today, less frivolous. Well, maybe that. Not quite less frivolous, but
you say that we did this in July 26th. PM Resigns.
PM Resigns. It is the Groundhog Day returns. The Randall Report, just Truss resigns. Ding dong, the witch is gone, but still the Tories remain in government. Is today's title. I mean, crikey.
An amazing 48 hours.
Well, amazing 48 hours, an amazing 44 days. And
an amazing fall from grace. What an embarrassment.
Well, I think grace is probably too generous a word to describe our departed PM. She had no grace.
Think she's actually really smart. Can I tell you why?
Go on.
Because she's been in power for 44 days.
Yes.
But she's entitled
to over 100 grand.
£115,000 per annum.
Yes.
As she was the Prime Minister. And that covers all the expenses that she would have had over her premiership.
Well,
so it's like a divorce case.
Exactly.
And she came out an absolute winner.
Yeah.
So I don't think she's crying all that much. Maybe even if her career's in tatters, that's 115 grand coming in.
Gotcha.
For dinner. Flip all.
Yeah, flip all. Is there, just before we carry on, have we got enough light here?
Yeah, it's fine.
It doesn't maybe look too pale. Good. Anybody think I was vain? Well, after what has been a tumultuous week in politics, she's, well, it's only 48 hours ago that she said she's not a quitter. Yet another U-turn.
She's not a quitter, she's a fighter.
I'm a fighter, not a quitter.
I'm not one for turning.
I'm not one for turning.
She's turned around, she's quit.
Or as Starmer put it, the lady's not for turning up. So after a tumultuous week in British politics, in a week from now, we'll be getting our fourth Prime Minister in just 5 years. Indeed, yet another. Indeed, in this political drama that makes House of Cards look a bit lackluster, recent events can only be described as, a clusterfuck or a Trussterfuck, with the British people paying for it at every turn. The latest incarnation actually lasted just 44 days, which, of course, is a new record. It was no surprise to us that Truss wasn't up to the challenge. Because we said this, if you listen to our previous podcast.
If you listen to the previous 15 podcasts where we berate Truss at every corner, we sort of knew this was on the cards. Right?
Oh, yes. In fact, I think at the beginning we gave it till Christmas, and that turns out that we were rather generous. I think in last week's, didn't we, or the most recent one, didn't we sort of say...
you also called her a silly twat, and I think we're all right.
Yes, I can't argue that one, can I? So it was no surprise to us that Truss wasn't really up to the challenge. What I can't grapple with is how on earth the Tory party membership was so deluded enough to think she would make a success of a premiership. And it seems now they were the only ones that thought she would. Because it was clear to us, certainly, that in the debates prior to her becoming PM, that there was something inherently wrong, not only in her ability to deliver argument in debates, but also with her economic policies, which had more holes in it than a flaming colander. She became so beleaguered so quickly, of course. One newspaper earlier this week, in fact, 7 days ago, put up a lettuce, notorious, of course.
Lettuce with a wig on.
No. They actually had a live webcam of a lettuce.
Yeah, a lettuce with a wig on.
Notorious for a short shelf life, with a wig on, in a ruse to see which would last longer,
The
and
letters
the
won.
letters won, and seemingly had more capability. I noticed one this morning somebody had actually beamed the said letters onto the thing of Westminster.
Really?
Yes, of the Houses of Parliament. And what a way to go, eh? You know what I mean? Being compared to a wet lettuce and losing.
The thing is, my question is, what has this done for the feminist movement? You know, it must have sort of dragged it back, at least in the political world.
Well, you say that.
The chances of another female prime minister, you know, you'd really think long and hard before you get another female prime minister.
Well,
and I don't think Truss has helped that situation one bit.
Well,
even if they are capable, I think you'd have a second think about whether that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, I'm not so sure, because what's become apparent to me is this delusion that the Tory party have got that allowed them, that facilitated her entering number 10 in the first place. The fact that already you've got the likes of the Bravermans and the Badenots, the same damned crew, once again putting their names forward, you know, to take the role of leader of the Tory party, and it does feel like Groundhog Day, and clearly, as far as I can see, there's no mandate now for this government to continue. Yet they cling on to their fading power rather than looking at the greater need of the country, and obviously risk. Ding dong, yeah. Risk self-annihilation as a political force, and you know, whilst they look inward, you know, the nation's institutions, the economy are standing up on the global stage, are all in tatters because of the gross incompetence, the arrogance, if you like, to not recognise that really they actually do need a time in opposition to regroup, because it's so factionalised, and you can't govern a country when your political party is so factional.
I think the point is that they're afforded this arrogance because they have an 80-seat majority. If it wasn't for that, they might very well have called an election earlier. But because they have such a wide margin, and through the whips they can probably sort of hold that majority for at least a while longer, they're willing to ride it up until the next election. I don't see...
While the country stinks.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that one, but my question is, why would they choose to self-implode and to call the election where they know they'll almost certainly lose? Why not, I mean, devil's advocate, why would you not, for your own political gain and for your own career, why wouldn't you just say, okay, this is bad, but we've got a majority, we'll hold on until the next election, even if it all goes to pot, fine, but at least I've ridden out the wave.
The longer the bollocks goes on, the longer they're going to remain out of office. And for a lot of MPs, there's quite a lot of younger Tory MPs that are now in Parliament. They're not all old bastards like me. And you know, if they were looking at the bigger picture, why they're there, and what being a member of Parliament actually means to them. And don't get me wrong, despite our cynicism towards the political, some of the political parties, the reality is there's a vast number of MPs that are there for good reason, that do want to represent their constituents. Unfortunately, they're the ones that you never hear about, because obviously they don't make the news because they're doing a decent job at looking after their constituents. And it would be better to sort of say, okay, we need to lick our wounds, regroup, and like it is not, at such a difficult time economically and for the country, maybe a couple of years in opposition if we called an election now, and the opposition party might make a bigger mess of it than us, and we'll be back in power again for a nice length of time. They're not. It feels like they're not looking at the big picture, which is why they ended up with Truss in the first place. And now, as the political situation descends into almost farce, some within the Conservative ranks want to reincarnate Boris Johnson's political career, which is it's a concept of pure and dangerous delusion. Surely, what do you make of this, Mel?
It's a question of popularity, isn't it? I mean, he was still popular among the ranks. He's
ousted him. There was over 60,
I agree.
60 resignations.
I understand that, but that was for their own political gain. This wasn't for the good of the party. This was to advance their own careers. They saw a chance to get rid of, the top tier of government, thinking that they had a position that they could sort of move into. And it benefited some, and it didn't benefit others. But it resulted in Truss, which turned out to be a disaster. And so a lot of the old guard are saying, at least we know where we stand with Boris. And even
a liar, a cheat.
Hold on a second. Even the reason it's not a fact. Even the reason why he was ousted was because he held on to a piece of information that perhaps he shouldn't have done. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
Well, come on.
But
it's Partygate. There was Wallpapergate.
Yeah, but Partygate is
hardly. Pinchergate.
But Partygate is hardly a huge issue.
No.
The Labour Party did it too.
Individual? No, they didn't.
Yes,
they were let off.
No, doesn't matter whether they were let off. They did it. They didn't. They.
The point is this.
The point is this.
It was an accumulation.
Partygate. Hold on. Partygate was done on both sides. Pinchergate wasn't great.
You're don't know it.
Boris was aware of what was going on, and he should have been more proactive to resolve the situation at the time. But he kept it under his belt, which was wrong. If he knew of an issue, it should have been handled with then and there. It's not because he's a bad politician. It's because there was a lack of judgment at that time.
But
is that enough? Is that enough?
Of course it is.
Is that enough to be sacked? Okay. I don't think necessarily it was.
He's been found to be dishonest. Individually, whether you look at Partygate, Wallpapergate, proroguing of Parliament, misleading Parliament, which he's still got to answer for, and if he's certainly if he ends up being leader again, and then that inquiry concludes that he did mislead Parliament, we'll be back in Groundhog Day with him having to resign for misleading Parliament. The idea that somebody who is found to be a liar and to be a little less than straightforward, with all the other things surrounding him and all of this stuff that went on that got us to the situation that caused the likes of Liz Truss, the idea of having him back, actually, all that does, it says, that's okay. We actually approve of the fact that we've got somebody who's got the morals of a flaming tomcat in charge, and we're willing to overlook now what we couldn't overlook before. And do you really think that the British public overall are going to wear that? Because the consensus seems to be at the moment that they will not, and it clearly. It seems to me that they've got the Tory party members have got the memories of a gnat.
It's about stability.
He can't offer stability.
But if it's economically, he can.
How can he offer stability? It turns out that our finances in this country were in a worse state than even before Trussonomics sent us down the U-bend. It turns out that things weren't going so well after all. So,
but during COVID, our economic situation could have been even worse. At least the government, you should give credit to the government for at least seeing us through what was the most significant moment in, let's say, 20 years.
Well, it
you know,
was
and they managed to at least navigate through that.
Furlough you're talking about. Furlough was a global leader. And
No, but everything that was put in place during COVID, you know, not only furlough, grants that were given out.
What you mean to the ones that were given out to some of their mates?
Okay. I'm not saying that was good either, but
squandering billions.
But it provided an element of stability. If another prime minister was in place, our situation could have been potentially worse.
Well,
so all I'm saying is, through one of the most dangerous issues that we've ever seen, you know, at least we were sort of navigated through that with some level of stability, and we came out of that relatively okay.
Come on, we said this before because that's why we felt that Rishi Sunak was a more suitable candidate in the last round.
And I think Sunak would be perfectly adept at the job as well. But like we were saying before, if Sunak gets the premiership, Boris will end up in cabinet, one way or another. If Boris becomes prime minister, then Sunak will get into cabinet. So one way or another, the power structure more or less remains the same. The head of the ship doesn't necessarily matter.
Okay. Well, clearly it does.
Half of the cabinet is going to go. Of the current cabinet is going to be removed.
And if we're not,
and we're going to end up with the old guard anyway. So nothing really changes.
If we're in danger of ending up with a cabinet once again made up of, in my view,
as long as the health minister gets to kick.
My own view is, the double up. Her as Deputy Prime Minister and Health Minister, Theresa Coffey.
She needs to go.
Yikes. We'll end up with the same band as before.
Exactly.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, Dominic Raab, Kwasi Kwarteng, maybe even Liz Truss again.
I hope that Kwarteng gets some kind of job back.
They'll all end up with a flaming job. And we'll be back. This is truly like Groundhog Day. So as before...
That's a good question. Can I ask you very quickly?
Go on.
So whoever becomes the next prime minister, do you reckon that they'll bring Truss back into the fold, or will she be sort of sent into oblivion forever?
Well, if the Tory party remain true to form, as we've seen before, they get rid of somebody, they sack them, as Boris was sacked, as Truss has been previously sacked, and a good many others, like Dominic Raab, were sacked from their positions, are in the wilderness for mere blink of an eye before being brought back in as a sort of with a pat on the head. And it's like, okay, I think people have forgotten about what you did now. Let's have you back in cabinet. And this is part of the problem. You end up with this, because it doesn't address the issue of clearly what has been the problem with this government, certainly over the last few years, not just this last 2 years, but somewhat longer, is that, and you've only got to look at the state of the country, the state of the institutions, the state of our services, and so forth, that we are going around the same circle of incompetence. And keep rewarding them by giving them yet another job in cabinet instead of recognising that they are not fit for the damn job. There comes a point when you've got to say, well, look, they're talking about Penny Mordaunt. The MPs and some of the other cabinet ministers, when she's worked in various different departments, have actually stated that she's no damned good at her job. So we're facing the prospect of her now, possibly, this ex-magician's assistant, could become Prime Minister. Could. And I say could, with a small c, possibly. But the fact of the matter is, by her own colleagues' assessment of her, she was useless. And yet we could end up with her as PM. Truss was sacked a number of times. She didn't exactly make a good job of being Foreign Secretary. That was blatant to see. Never mind before she got even close to the leadership debates. And yet, they put her in number 10. And it's that failure to not recognise that we need something better. So I guess that's my next question. You've got this procession of wannabes has begun in this latest contest for yet another leader, and still not one, in my view, perhaps other than Rishi Sunak, worthy of any attention. Candidates of which I wager there'll be many by the time it's done, because it already you've got that sense of quite a few are throwing the hat in the ring, or going to. And they're going to need a minimum of 100 MPs backing them by Monday. And we could very well end up in a situation where none of them have got 100 MPs backing them. What then? They all end up, because there's half a dozen contenders, and they all end up with about 80 each. Or there's 8 contenders, and they all end up with about 50 or 60 each.
Well, no, because they'll negotiate, won't they? So if they get to that point, they'll negotiate with whoever they think is the next strongest. Then they'll be like, okay, fine. Okay. You know, let's say if it's between Boris and Sunak. You know, Boris had yesterday 50 odd. Sunak had 36, or that's already 80 odd. God knows what the situation is by the end of the day. Yeah, okay. So they'd end up having a conversation saying, look, you know, I want to go for PM. Whether Boris has to stand down or Rishi Sunak would stand down. Yeah, they pull together with an understanding.
Yeah, I think you're missing on my point, because the understanding might exist to get there before Monday, to whittle it down. Yeah, but
they just pull support, though, wouldn't they?
But the problem comes, as we saw with Truss, they then reward those that support. You still end up with a factionalised party. The necessity right now.
Yeah, that's politics, though, isn't it, Simon? That's the way. That's the way they have this contest. Okay, is that's the result. You will party. You will have a faction. You'll have a factioned cabinet. That's just normal.
No, it's not normal. No party has ever managed to govern when there's so many different factions and they can't coalesce and unify. It is necessary, in order for a party to govern, to have some unity. And it's the problem the Tories have got is, as has been clear in recent times, is an inability to actually unify itself. It's the reason why Labour couldn't govern under Corbyn, is because it became too factionalised. You got the left, you got the centre left.
Then you should be happy. You should be happy if that's the case, because it only means that the party will implode even faster. So you're more likely to get an election earlier on, you know, if they continue down this path.
You say that. I mean, what I would prefer to see is the Tories out of office, but be a decent and effective opposition, because I think in any successful democracy, you also need an effective opposition. And if we see the Tory party, as much as I'm never been really much in favour of them, if they're not an effective opposition, you can end up with a pretty poor government on the other side. And this is part of the problem this time.
But it depends.
We had a very poor opposition for far too long, and it made Tory government very lazy.
But that was because of the number of seats that they garnered. If you assume that in the next election the Tories will lose a whole load of seats and Labour becomes utterly dominant, then the Conservatives, as an opposition party, won't have that much strength anyway. So they won't have the power to oppose. Well, because they lose so many seats that Labour will be in the same position that the Conservatives are in, that they have such a big majority that they won't even have to sort of consider the opposition.
Well, the calculation at the moment is that the current, I think they're 39 points adrift. They're certainly in the high 30s. They could be facing the loss of 200 seats.
Maybe.
And more. But it's this delusion. This is what I'm trying to get across. Where do they think they can save their bacon in the next 2 years to get re-elected? What kind of miracle do they think is going to give them that possibility? And you can't.
No, there isn't one. It's damage limitation at this point, for sure. They know they're going to lose. It's just a question as to by how much.
So while they selfishly look at it, and play this silly game, the country goes down even further.
I don't think it matters anyway.
You know,
who knows what's going to happen with COVID? That's going to become more of an issue.
no,
Avian flu is becoming an issue.
No, come on,
energy supply is becoming an issue.
I think
we have a war on our doorstep. That's going to continue.
That is a massive issue.
That's going to continue.
Avian flu, I think, is
it's the biggest disaster we've seen.
But it's a huge disaster. Great.
Okay.
It is a terrible disaster.
There's nothing the government can do about these things.
Well, yeah.
The economy is going to collapse. That's inevitable.
Like BSE, like lots of other things that have happened over the last 30 or 40 years, avian and COVID included. It was a massive issue 2 years ago. Now it's less of an issue, and there'll be something else that comes along. The biggest issue, the war in Russia.
So we have to ride the storm. Our situation will not improve anytime soon. So it doesn't matter what government is involved; they have to try and manoeuvre around 4 or 5 horrible situations, which are unlikely to improve.
It matters, and I tell you why it matters. It matters because whilst we have a government that looks so damned inept, with the likes of the Trusses, I mean, crikey almighty, it was cringeworthy the last 44 days. There's nothing else, no other way to describe it, other than cringeworthy. Just to look at her and that stupid, smug look, and the fact that in the finish you couldn't rely on anything that came out of her mouth. The lady's not for turning. She how many U-turns? 2 days ago she wasn't for quitting. A day later she quit. That kind of weakness in government is a gift to the likes of the Vladimir Putins of this world. This country cannot afford the luxury of another experiment of what is clear.
It's funny you say that.
A failed government and a failed party.
Putin actually made a comment about Liz Truss and said that she was probably the most inept human being to ever enter government, and he wished her luck. He wished her luck on her next appointment.
Yes, well, I don't know what job she's going to get next, but for God's sake, really, I hope that the constituency of which she's MP, that when the election does come, the voters put her out of office, because she is absolute. This is the danger. We now need a leader who actually knows what they're doing. I don't believe it is Boris. I think it's become too divisive. I think it, as we said once before I don't know what you think about this, Mel, that it's time to bring back some of the Tory grandees into the cabinet who've had long experience, perhaps from 20, 25 years ago, maybe as advisors, maybe in all sorts of different guises, to guide things, because there's some vast experience in the Tory party.
But you're talking about pulling people from the House of Lords,
if necessary, as advisors. This is now a country that's in a state of some kind of chaos and emergency, and needs the steadying hands and certainly steadying opinions of some of those that recent governments, from Cameron onwards, have chosen to sideline, because they don't want them, some of these people, to make them look, how can I say, inexperienced and unprofessional.
But if you say that, then maybe the best way is to have some sort of bipartisan movement where you actually look towards, the other side of the house to draw some experience from all sides.
Totally agree.
Whether or not anyone would actually agree to do that or not is another thing.
Totally agree.
But it might be a question saying, look, we're in a difficult situation. We might end up being on a war footing.
We did it in the war.
yeah, exactly.
We
and
have
everybody came together. But maybe this is
a government of national interest.
But maybe we're in a bad enough situation where we go to the sort of a war footing and we say that we need to draw from the experience from all parties at this point.
Yeah.
And, let's put everything aside.
Yeah.
For the next 2 years, we know that things are going to get difficult.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's important to remember that during the Second World War, despite the fact that Churchill was Prime Minister, it was a coalition. And I think there is time to put party politics to one side and recognise the needs of the country. And that takes some balls to do, quite frankly.
I agree. I mean, you have to have, you have to leave your ego to the side. Agree to work together for a period of time, knowing full well that sort of when the next elections come in, that the Conservatives are almost certainly going to be on the way out.
Yeah.
But at least it creates, we keep on talking about stability, will create that level of stability going forward, because you have members of Parliament from both sides that are actually working on current policy.
Yeah.
And as one party becomes the opposition, whoever comes in already has a footing and knows how to progress.
Don't you find it rather odd that, going back to what I was just saying, don't you find it rather odd that the Tory party over the last 12 years, I'd say actually certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't recognised the need to draw on that vast experience that exists within the party from when they previously governed during the 80s and early 90s, in recognition that some of these people might be able to advise them well rather than just sidelining them. Surely, I think that's egotistical that to keep those people in the background.
Yes, they are.
Well, that is to our detriment, and I think that was half the problem with Truss. Ego-driven rather than, it seemed to me she never asked herself the question whether she was capable of doing the job. Wanting it is not enough. There comes a point sometimes when you have to ask yourself, I want this. Am I capable of doing it and really making a good job of it? Because wanting it is simply not enough. Anyway, much is going to happen, I suspect, in the next week. We could find ourselves back in the eternal loop of this if they don't sort it out.
Well, by next week we'll have a new Prime Minister, so we'll have another special.
We'll have another special, no doubt, as we dissect the decision that is made. And I do have a quote of the week from John F. Kennedy. And I'm going to direct it at the Tory MPs. John F. Kennedy once said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." And of course, I have the answer for those MPs. Please step aside whilst we still have a country left. Good day.
Thank you for watching.